The 8th of June, 1899, Volume 2. Louisa wants everyone to convert. My adorable Jesus still continues to make himself seen, all benignity and sweetness. This morning, while I was together with him, he repeated again, "Tell me, what do you want?" Immediately I said, "Jesus, my dear, what I would really want is that the whole world would convert." What a request out of proportion. But still my loving Jesus told me, "I would content you if all had the goodwill to be saved. And yet to show you that I would gladly grant everything you have said, let us go together into the midst of the world, and all of those whom we will find with the goodwill to be saved, as evil as they may be, I will give to you." So we went out in the midst of the people to see who had the goodwill to be saved. But to our highest displeasure, we found a number so very scarce that it is sorrowful just to think about it. In this number, so very scarce, there was my confessor, the majority of priests, and part of the faithful, but not everyone from Corato. Then he showed me the various offences he was receiving. I prayed him to let me share in his sufferings, and Jesus poured his bitternesses from his mouth into mine. After this he told me, "My daughter, I feel my mouth too embittered. Oh, please, I beg you to sweeten it." I said to him, "I would gladly give you anything, but I have nothing. You yourself tell me, what can I give you?" And he told me, "Let me suckle milk from your breasts, for in this way you will be able to sweeten me." And at the very moment he was saying this, he lay down in my arms and began to suckle. While he was doing this, a fear came to me that it might not be baby Jesus, but the devil. Therefore I placed my hand on his forehead, and I signed him with the cross, per signum crucis. Jesus looked at me all festive, and while still suckling, he smiled, and with his lively eyes he seemed to tell me, "I am not a demon, I'm not a demon." After this, he seemed to be satiated. He got up on my lap and kissed me all over. Now, since I too felt my mouth bitter from the bitternesses he had poured into me, I felt like I wanted to suckle from the breasts of Jesus, but I did not dare do it. But Jesus invited me to do it, and so I plucked up courage and I began to suckle. Oh, what sweetness of paradise came from that holy breast, but who can express it? Then I found myself inside myself, all inundated with sweetnesses and contentments. Now I will explain that when it happens that Jesus suckles from my breasts, my body does not participate in this at all. Rather, it happens when I am outside of myself. It seems that this thing occurs only between the soul and Jesus, and when he wants to do this, he is always a child. It is so true that it is only the soul and not the body, that when this happens, I'm always either in the vault of the heavens or wandering through other points of the earth. Sometimes then I have said that as I returned to myself, I felt a pain at that place from which baby Jesus had suckled, because in suckling, sometimes he would do it a little strongly, so much so that it seemed that through that suckling he wanted to pull out my heart from within my breast. Therefore I felt a sensible pain, and as I returned to myself, the soul would communicate it to the body. But then this happens also in other things, as for example, when the Lord transports me outside of myself and lets me share in his crucifixion. Jesus himself lays me on the cross and pierces my hands and feet through with the nails. I feel such pain that I feel I am dying. Then when I find myself inside myself, I feel it well in my body, so much so as to be unable to move my fingers or my arm, and so forth with the other sufferings that the Lord shares with me. To say everything, I would be too long. I also remember that when Jesus would suckle from my breasts, he would place his mouth there, but it is from my heart that I would feel him draw whatever he suckled, so much so that while he would do this, at times I have felt my heart being torn from my breast, and sometimes feeling a most vivid pain, I have said to him, "My pretty little one, indeed you are too impertinent. Do it more mildly, for it hurts very much." And he would laugh to himself. In the same way, when it is that I suckle from Jesus, it is from his heart that I draw that milk or blood, so much so that for me, suckling from the breast of Jesus is the same as drinking from his side. I will add also another thing. Since the Lord every now and then is pleased with pouring a most sweet milk from his mouth, or with letting me drink his most precious blood from his side, then when he wants to suckle from me, he suckles nothing else but what he himself has given me, because I have nothing with which to sweeten him, but much with which to embitter him. This is so true that sometimes, in the very act in which he would suckle from me, I would suckle from Jesus, and I would realize clearly that what he was drawing from me was nothing other than what he himself was giving me. It seems I have explained myself enough, as much as I could. End of the reading. The 8th of June, 1927, Volume 22. For one who does the divine will, all things and places are her own. How she takes eternity in her power. How God loses nothing, because he is perfect in loving. I was following the divine will in its acts, in everything it had done in the order of the whole creation, from the beginning of the world up to the present. But while I was doing this, I thought to myself, what is past is not in my power, therefore it seems a waste of time to me to go on tracing what has passed. At that moment, my sweet Jesus moved in my interior, telling me, "My daughter, for one who does my will and lives in it, all times and all places are hers. My supreme will loses nothing of what it does, and with its own unique power, it does the act and it preserves it within itself, intact and beautiful, just as it did it. So one who lives in my supreme will finds in it the order of all its acts, as if it were doing them at that very instant. And the soul, uniting herself with it, does what my volition is doing. This is all the delight, the satisfaction, the glory of my will, that while its acts are eternal, the littleness of the creature who lives in it takes eternity in her power, and finding the acts of her creature as though in act, she repeats with him. She loves, she glorifies the endlessness of the acts of he who created her. And so a contest of works, a contest of love and of glory is formed between them. Therefore, the times of creation are at her disposal, as well as the place of the terrestrial Eden. She has the times of my incarnation, of my passion, and Bethlehem, Nazareth, and Calvary are not far from her. Past, distance do not exist for her, but everything is present and near. Even more, you must know that my will gives the unity of everything to the soul, and just as my will, while being one, does everything, in the same way, the soul who possesses the divine unity encloses within herself the thoughts of all, the words, works, steps, and heartbeats of all, as if they were one alone, in such a way that my will finds in her all generations and the single acts of each one, just as it finds themselves within itself. Oh, how the steps of this chosen creature can be recognized. How sweet is her treading. She goes before her God, but she never goes alone. She carries the treading of the steps of all within her steps. Her voice contains the note of all human voices, and oh, what a beautiful harmony she forms in our will. Her heartbeat unleashes little flames, for as many creatures as have come out to the existence of life. Oh, how she delights us. We amuse ourselves together. She is our dear jewel, the reflection of our works, the image of our life. This is why I want my will to reign in the creature, to fill her with all of its acts. In fact, when it does not reign, the void of its acts is formed in her, and oh, how terrible is the void of a divine will in the creature. It is like a dry land full of rocks, without sun and without water, that is terrifying to look at. And how many there are of these voids in the creature. And when I find one who lives in my will, I make feast, for I can fill her with all the acts of my will. Then I was thinking about what is written above, and my Jesus added, "My daughter, our love is perfect in all our works, and since it is perfect, we lose nothing of what we do, and therefore our works serve as triumph, glory, and everlasting crown of our divine being. And whatever is done in the perfection of our perfect love is not subject either to being lost or to losing its wholeness and beauty. How different is the work of the creature, because she lacks the perfect love for her works. She operates and puts her works out. She has neither the virtue nor the space in order to preserve them within herself, and this is why she loses many of her works. And since they lack the life and the love of the one who has formed them, the human works do not have the virtue of remaining beautiful, intact, and ever new, just as they were made. Therefore, with the soul who lives in our divine will, we delight in showing her all our acts that appear as though being present and in the act of being done. And we say to the soul, repeat our act, so that what we do you may do as well, so as to place the act of the Creator in common with the creature. It happens as to someone who possesses many beautiful things, but keeps them under lock and key in separate rooms. No one knows that he has so many things of varied beauty. Now, a second person wins the favour of the first one. He proves to be faithful to him, nor is he capable of moving one comma of his will. He captures the heart of the first one, who feels his heart crack, because his love toward that person leads him with an irresistible force to show him the goods he possesses and the variety and rarity of so many precious things. Therefore, he opens the secret rooms and says to him, I feel divided in love if I do not make you aware of my secrets, if I do not let you see what I possess, so that we may enjoy and possess together. Those things seem all new to the second one, because he had never seen things of that kind, but for the first those were ancient things. The same happens for one who comes to live in our will. The doors are open, our secrets are revealed. She is made aware of all our most beautiful works. To keep secrets with her, to hide our acts, would be a weight upon our heart. It would be as though keeping her like a stranger. Oh, how this would afflict us. In fact, true and perfect love admits neither secrets nor separation of works and of goods. On the contrary, what is mine is yours. What I know, you know as well. Evermore, you must know that my will forms the echo of its works, of its love, of its word, in the soul in whom it reigns, in such a way that on hearing its echo, the soul repeats the work, the love, and the word of the divine fiat. End of the reading. The 8th of June, 1931, Volume 29. Pleasure of God when one remembers what he did in creation. The repeated acts form the nourishment of the soul. How one begins on earth and completes in heaven. I feel the powerful force of the divine fiat that calls me into it to follow its acts. So my little intelligence paused in Eden in the act of the creation of man. What a solemn act! After having created all things as preparation, to celebrate him for whom he had created all creation as royal palace in which man was to live with all sumptuousness and comfort, such that he was lacking nothing. It is enough to say that it was a royal palace formed by our celestial Father by the power of his divine fear. So while I was thinking of this, my sweet Jesus told me, "Blessed daughter, the sweetest memory that I am most immensely pleased with is when the creature remembers my love in creation, in a special way, that of man. Our love poured its own self out more than a mother when she gives birth to her dear child. Our love ran to enclose him within itself, so that everywhere, inside and outside of himself, he might find the support of our love that says to him, 'I love you, I love you.' The sweet sound of our love whispers to his ear, palpitates in his heart, resounds strong and ardent kisses on his lips, tight embraces to carry him in our paternal arms, as triumph of our love that at any cost wants to love the creature. So there is nothing sweeter, dearer, more pleasing than reminding us of how much love we created man and all things. Our pleasure is so great that to the fortunate creature who comes before our adorable Majesty to remind us of this love of ours so great, we redouble our loving bonds with her, to give her new graces, new light, and we call her the repeater of our feast, because in creation everything was feast for us and for all. And the creature, by reminding us of what we did in creation, puts in feast our love, our power, our creative wisdom, that with such great inimitable mastery had created the whole universe, and then the mastery in creating man, that surpasses everything. So all our divine qualities made feast, and looking at the creature, by whose memory and whose little requital of love they were put in feast, they compete among themselves, and one redoubles for her the love, one the goodness, one the sanctity. In some, each of our divine qualities wants to give of its own, to repeat with her what we did in creation. Therefore, repeat often the sweet memory of our insuperable love that we had in creation. It was a creature of ours, an image of ours, a child of ours that we issued to the light. And this is why we made such great display of love. And in hearing it being reminded to us, we feel like loving him more. So the whole creation is nothing other than a display of our loving will toward the creature. And in its loving display, it keeps repeating, "Fiat, fiat," to pearl all creation with its display of love. More so, since each act, word, thought done in our divine will form the nourishment of the soul. Nourishment preserves life. It makes it grow and maintains for it the necessary strength to be able to form sufficient nourishments so as not to remain on an empty stomach. So the continued acts are nothing other than foods that are prepared from one day to the next, so as to always have something with which to nourish oneself. If no acts are done, she will have no food. So the poor creature will have nothing with which to satisfy her hunger. Therefore the life of the good, holy and divine acts will die in her. If then the acts are not continued, but every now and then she will have scarce nourishments, and when food is not sufficient, the life of good grows as weak, and weakness makes one lose the taste and the appetite for nourishing oneself. On the other hand, when the acts are continued, each act has its exercise. One makes itself food, one water, one fire in order to cook them, one condiment to make itself be enjoyed, in such a way as to whet the appetite. In sum, the repeated acts are nothing other than divine cuisine, forming the celestial dining for the creature. And oh, how beautiful it is to see the creature who, with the continuation of her acts in our fiat, prepares for herself divine nourishments and feeds herself with the foods of her celestial fatherland. In fact, you must know that one holy thought calls for another, one word, one good act calls for another, and one serves the other in order to be nourished, and nourishment forms life. Then I continue to think of the divine will and of the great good that one receives by living all abandoned in his arms. And my sweet Jesus added, "Good daughter, the great good of living of a divine volition is amazing and almost incomprehensible for the human creature. You must know that everything good, holy, that is done in my divine will is nothing other than seeds that germinate in the field of the soul, placing as though many seeds of divine light that set a beginning that will have no end. In fact, everything that is done in my divine will is sown, germinates, grows in an admirable way on earth while one is living, but the completion will be formed in heaven. The final development, the variety of the beauties, the shades, the most beautiful and striking tints, will be given to her in the celestial fatherland. So each act done on earth will be like taking more room in heaven, one additional right, and an advanced possession of the celestial dwelling. For each additional act that she has done, the creature will bring with herself new beatitudes, new joys, communicated to her by my will. My divine fiat never says enough to the creature. It wants to make her grow in sanctity, in grace, in beauty, and to her last breath of life down here, and therefore it reserves for itself to give the final brushstroke and completion as its full triumph in the celestial regions. Therefore, in my will, there are no stops, and the circumstances of life, now of pains, now of humiliations, and now of glory, form the runs in order to always run in it, to give it free field, to let it sow new divine seeds in the creature, that the divine fiat will take charge of cultivating and making grow in an admirable way, and of giving them completion in the celestial glory. Therefore, in heaven, nothing begins, but everything begins on earth, and heaven completes. End of the reading. There are no more readings today.